Hey guys, I'm back with another quick video. My name is Jason, the creator of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2, and what I want to show off for you guys today is the ongoing progress for 1.0. There have been a lot of changes for this version, quality of life things that I've gone through and trying to finally stabilize before releasing, but with that comes a new environment release. Where I'm trying to go through and actually change the environment that this world lives in to make it a little bit more threatening during the day than it was without using the zombies. So here we are at the city location where we have a good amount of PK trying to clear the streets. As you wander through the city, you'll see large amounts of PK and large amounts of bandits actually warring it out for these streets along with the zombies. So the zombies have now been moved indoors, so a lot of the zombies during the day are actually hiding within the building structures, and they will be pouring out when the NPCs or the player walks by. That will cause them to start to come out of that building and try to attack. Now with some of these changes comes a higher difficulty, so I've gone through, and as you saw there, I was taken down by bowmen. So what I wanted to do is because there's no guns inside the game, I wanted to start looking at what are our ranged weapons in the game and how are they being used by the NPCs. Well, before they had as kind of a standard, they had these NPCs that would just kind of stand there with the bow. They would take a really long time once they pulled the bow to actually fire. What I've done is set this to difficulty level, so as the game progresses, these guys will shoot faster is the concept. So here we have an example bowman inside the environment, and basically he's surrounded by zombies. So in most of these, in this kind of environment, he would not survive very long. And so what I've done is I've tried to make it to where he actually has a fighting chance for survival by giving them a faster response time on that bow. And you can see there he lost out in this encounter, but as you travel around and see more bowmen inside the environment, you will see that they are faster. They will try to avoid being attacked, and they will try to continue to fire on the enemies. So that will make them much more threatening inside the environment. So I've also reintroduced weather to this mod. So before I was working on the weather mod before, and more people started to release their weather mods. So I stepped back, I pulled those files down out of the mod to make room for more people writing their mods for weather. Now that we're starting to cap off I Am Legion 1.0, I wanted to reintroduce this weather system. So with that comes a lot of visual changes. So essentially I've gotten rid of a lot of the glow blur effects that were in here and made this more about a higher contrast during the day to where it is actually bright. So you need to get under shade to be able to see inside dark environments when out in the daylight. And when you're heading into interiors, those interiors should be a bit darker for you guys. So they should be a bit more ominous, requiring you to actually use your flashlight to see what's going on inside those environments. You can see here. So there still is some leftover code where they basically have made it to where you have to activate the buildings. So inside here, sometimes you'll get this effect where you'll have a large number of zombies that are standing there and they don't quite start moving yet. What they've done is they basically made these interior cells not activate until you actually step inside the cell, or you have to. Something has to be done to kind of break this first interior area, and then it will get activated essentially. So those zombies will start to move out once you've actually gone in. So to help with this, I've started to make the more of the bandits and more of the NPC PK start to investigate the area, which means they should start looking or walking near these interior cells, which will more than likely start to activate those cells more, so that you'll end up with more interactions coming out of the interior cell buildings. If we travel down the road a little bit, so basically the street should be well populated now with bandits and PK. I'm going to continue to try to balance this as the game gets more difficult to try to make it more realistic that the PK are being outnumbered by bandits in some areas where that makes sense, so that they are more dangerous to travel in. This will make it more realistic that you have to care if there's a bunch of bowmen watching for the player. If there are a large number of bowmen that are watching for the player, then you need to avoid those archers at all costs, because they will shoot on sight and they will aim much faster now. So you don't have the luxury of just getting to run up and take out as many of these bowmen before they get a chance to fire. So let's go ahead and switch over to night. There have been some added changes since 0.9 to 1.0, and as I said, I'm going to actually go and do a better summary video here before 1.0 releases. But essentially, one of the additional things that I'll mention is I was looking at doing like reshades and trying to change things with an overall reshade, but as most of you guys know that have worked with reshades, this ends up messing with your actual in like your UIs and your main menus and your interfaces and all of that. So what I've tried to do is go in here and do everything within engine. So this is an example, and I'm still dialing this in, but this is an example of my heavy fog night. So now you'll have more environments that are basically flooded with fog, that are more difficult to see through, and will challenge you to actually go down inside the fog and take on those enemies inside the fog. I'm really excited to hear how this impacts your guys' gameplay as far as different missions that you're on, and how this fog impacts your ability to get through certain mission areas. If this makes it too difficult to get through certain areas because you can't see through the fog or see through the rain. But the idea here is that the environment is more deadly, more intense in a lot of areas. I'm setting up the documentation now to where if you don't like the weather mods, I'm setting up all the conditions on how to remove that information from the mod so that you don't have to have the weather changes. But I think that a lot of this is crucial to how the game is being played, to allow you to basically say, okay, if the weather conditions are too bad this evening, you know, let's go sleep and then wake up and try again in different conditions. But once we switch to night here, so you see it's still dialing, well actually you can't see the clock because my my webcam's over top of it here, but essentially it has not completely turned to night yet. So the weather effects make it look very dark inside this environment. The contrast changes, and removing those things like blur effects and those kind of things ends up giving you a much sharper game overall, while retaining some of the lighting effects. So I wanted to keep some of the lens flare, some of that effect that would be on the screen to make that more immersive, but at the same time also continue to look at how can we make that harder to see inside these foggy environments. So if fog starts to play out, then you will probably, if you don't want to go into the fog, you will probably need to find a bed, sleep until you can wake up where you're not dealing with the fog anymore. Now, with most survival games like Fallout and that kind of thing, it's nice to be able to wait a certain amount of time. I do get that it's a little frustrating that you have to wait a full day cycle. And so please let me know how this weather change affects you. If you are finding that you're constantly going and sleeping now because you don't want to have to deal with the weather conditions, that kind of thing, please give me your feedback. Let me know how this impacts your gameplay. And I'll continue to look at that. But even while I'm saying that, I'm sitting there going like, maybe there's more I can do with the sleeping system to make that sleeping system sleep, you know, a couple of hours rather than sleep the full amount. So we'll continue to see what we can get, but the environment is much more intense now, much more visually interesting. I'm actually really enjoying modifying these visuals along with the mod itself to end up getting a very intense evening. So the idea here is that I've boosted the emissives inside the game. So using the engine to boost those emissives, you start to get this glowing city kind of effect at night, which I'm actually really enjoying. I'm going to continue to dial this in a little bit to where I get that some of these areas right now you're seeing kind of a glowing city, and that's where I've tried to boost that emissive probably a little much. But what's really cool about that is that you start to get these real world reflections if you're using ray tracing and that kind of thing that just bounce around the world and make this kind of a mystical kind of dark city environment. And so I'm going to continue to dial in those and mess with those before the actual release of 1.0. But I'm super excited for you guys to get to try this mod out. Some of the changes now that we're getting closer here to the actual evening, we do have screamers are now searching the world for the player. So they're actually going out and patrolling the night environment. So they're no longer just standing there. The spitters will also be moving through the environment, but I've turned off their footprints, so you're no longer seeing a bunch of weird footprints all over the map, which is the result of having these guys patrol, as you would end up with footprints just kind of scattered everywhere across the map. So these guys will be patrolling, but they won't be actually like leaving their footprints as they go. Also with that, I've looked at trying to make a Romero zombie mode. So what you're seeing right now is the Romero zombies. They're actually based primarily on sound. They're still a little, you know, they still need a little work to get them to be the most realistic. But essentially the idea is that these things are much sharper in listening than the standard zombie. And they're listening much more intently through the sound, to where they are now moving through the city in large numbers based on your distance. And so I'm still trying to dial in things like your distance, but when you're working with a higher density, this should result in these guys moving across the map in hordes. So you should end up with some horde effects of these guys moving around the map, and the longer you stay in any one position, now you start to deal with these zombies getting closer and closer, and then eventually lurching towards you. So the hope is that for players that don't want to play with the constant, you know, you have a barrage of zombies that are constantly after you, you could look at this city slowly moving in to attack you. So here's an example of these Romero zombies. There's a bandit over here that's fighting them off, and as you see, they're coming from all over the streets to try to get at that bandit. So the longer he's down on the street, the more likely it is that he'll be attacked and killed. We also have a PK Bowman here who's also trying to ward off the storm here, and so it's something that I'm continuing to try to balance as we shift between the 3 different versions. So I think with that, some of the updates that are coming will be changing the way that I'm going to try to introduce the survivor difficulty to the system now. So we'll have casual survivor, survivor, and then ultimate survivor, where I'll be balancing out some of these difficulties, and that will be coming this weekend, along with loot changes, weapon balancing, and several other systems. And so that should help provide a much more interesting environment for sure inside this city. Now you have a lot of high glowing objects and intense worlds to deal with, and that's really what the goal for I Am Legion is to bring that intensity to the game, and also remove some of those more annoying features that just were not creating that immersive environment. And so I'll continue to be dialing this in throughout the week. The current goal again is to release this weekend. I will more than likely be trying to work over the weekend on Saturday, and hopefully release Saturday, but if not, it'll probably be Sunday. I want to try to get in as many changes as possible before the release. All right, guys, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing your guys' feedback.